All right, so let's dive in here and look at this new thing from Hugging Face called HudGs. AI chatbots are all the rage right now, but actually building one, well, it can be a real resource hog. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Hugging Face is saying they're going to fix that with HudGs.
We've got a stack of articles here from Luzina Digital, a few other tech sites. Seems like they're aiming to make the whole process of using chatbots, well, a lot more efficient and cheaper, really.
Yeah, what's really interesting here is they're tackling that cost thing head on. Um, that's been holding a lot of companies back.
Mhm.
It's that inference stage of AI that eats up all the computing power and money. When the system's actually processing the information and giving responses. Hugging Face is basically offering prepackaged AI that's ready to go. It really speeds things up, like a lot.
So instead of taking weeks to set everything up, they're saying you can get a chatbot running in like minutes using HudgeS. Okay, that's pretty intriguing. What else is in these articles that makes this so different? Well, a few things stand out. First, HudgeS is built on, open source technology. So that means companies have more transparency and control over their AI. And they're not limiting you to just a couple of models. HudgeS launches with 13 different large language models, or LLMs. Those are the underlying systems that let the chatbot understand and generate text. Like, think Llama, Gemma, Mistral. They're even going to add more models in the future.
Hold on, so you're saying I can pick and choose from all these different AI brains for my chatbot?
Yep, that's right.
That's pretty neat. But if it's all pre-packaged and ready to go, does that mean I'm stuck with whatever hardware Hugging Face decides to use?
No, not at all. That's another area where they've been pretty clever. HudgeS is compatible with a wide range of hardware, from like NVIDIA and AMD GPUs to the Google TPUs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty flexible. Companies can use HudgeS no matter what kind of infrastructure they already have.
All right, so we've got speed, flexibility, and tons of AI models to choose from. Sounds great. But I'm also thinking about the practical side. What about security? If I'm giving all my data to this system, how do I know it's going to be safe?
You're right. That's a really important point. Data security is, super important, and Hugging Face knows that. They've made sure your data and models stay within your own systems. No internet traffic needed for deployment. That minimizes the risk of breaches and keeps everything under your control.
Okay, so that's good to know. Peace of mind on the security front. Now, what about the cost? Is this going to be super expensive for companies?
Actually, that's one of the most exciting things about HudgeS. They're offering it at just $1 per hour per container, which is like way cheaper than building and maintaining a chatbot yourself. And for companies that already have the Hugging Face Enterprise Hub subscription, it's completely free.
Wow, free. That's a pretty aggressive move. It makes you wonder what their plan is. Are they trying to take over the whole market by making AI cheap and easy to use?
It's definitely a smart move. By removing the financial barrier, they're opening up AI development to a much wider audience, including like startups and smaller companies who couldn't afford it before. This could really lead to a surge in innovation, with way more companies experimenting with chatbots and finding new applications.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. It seems like Hugging Face is really shaking things up, making chatbot deployment faster, cheaper, and more secure. But it's not just about the technology itself, right? There are bigger questions about, like, who gets to use AI and how it's used.
Oh, for sure. We
Yeah.
could be talking about like a whole new era of AI where smaller companies can compete with the big tech companies.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's like leveling the playing field a bit.
And what about those big companies? Didn't you mention something about compatibility with OpenAI?
Oh, yeah, that's another strategic move. They made sure that the HudgeS API is compatible with OpenAI. So switching over from those systems should be pretty easy for companies that are already using them, I mean. It makes HudgeS a really tempting option.
It's like they thought of everything to make this as easy as possible. Okay, going back to the articles for a sec, was there anything in there about how Hugging Face is actually building HudgeS? Like the tech behind it?
Well, one interesting thing is they're using their own open source tools to power HudgeS. Things like text generation, inference, and transformers.
So they're using their own products, basically.
Yeah.
That shows they believe in their own tech, I guess. But doesn't that also mean there could be limitations if it's all built on their own internal systems?
That's a fair point. But, open source development relies on collaboration and community input, right? So by using these technologies, HudgeS benefits from the work of a lot of developers, which, helps make sure it's robust and adaptable.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not just Hugging Face working alone. They're tapping into a bigger pool of expertise. Okay, so we've talked about speed, cost, security. What about the legal stuff? Are there any compliance issues that companies need to be aware of?
They seem to have that covered too. HudgeS is SOC 2 certified, which is, a big deal for data security. And Hugging Face has tried to minimize compliance risks by including all the necessary licenses and terms of service in HudgeS.
So they're trying to make it easier for companies to use AI responsibly. That's good. Whenever I see a powerful new technology, I always start to think about the potential downsides. What are some of the possible unintended consequences of making chatbot creation so easy?
That's a great question, and it's important to think about. While more accessibility is generally good, it's important to consider the potential for, misuse.
Like specifically, what's a worst case scenario here?
Well, one concern is that bad actors could use this technology for bad things, like spreading misinformation or creating convincing phishing scams.
Yeah, I can see how that could be a problem.
Yeah,
But more broadly, do you think this could lead to companies feeling pressured to use AI chatbots, even if it's not the right fit for their business? Like, is there a risk of this becoming a trend that everyone jumps on without really understanding it?
there's always that risk with any new technology, especially when it gets a lot of attention. But ultimately, the decision of whether to use AI chatbots should be based on what the company actually needs and wants to achieve.
Right, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. But,
Mm.
I'm just thinking out loud here. Could there be a disadvantage for companies that choose not to use this technology?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. As AI chatbots get better and more common, companies that use them well could get a big advantage in areas like customer service, efficiency, and even product development.
So it could actually impact their bottom line. All right, let's go back to Hugging Face and HudgeS. We talked about them using their own tech for development. Did the articles mention anything about their motivations beyond just making money?
Well, Hugging Face has always been a big supporter of open source AI and making it accessible to more people. It seems like HudgeS is just a natural extension of that.
So it's not just a business decision. It's also about their philosophy, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, I want to go back to something you said earlier about the possibility of misuse. Do you think there's anything that Hugging Face or, the AI community as a whole can do to prevent those bad things from happening?
Definitely, there are several things they can do, like having strong content moderation policies, developing tools to detect and flag bad uses of the technology, and being more transparent about how these models are trained and used.
So it's not just about making the technology easy to use, it's also about making sure it's used responsibly. All right, it feels like we've covered a lot here. Let's take a step back and recap what we've learned so far. So we started out talking about the problem that Hugging Face wants to solve with HudgeS. Building AI chatbots has always been so expensive and time-consuming.
Right, and they're tackling that with these pre-packaged AI models that are ready to go in minutes, seriously cutting down the development time and cost.
And they're not just offering like a one-size-fits-all solution. We talk about how HudgeS gives you all these choices, like 13 different large language models. And it works with all kinds of hardware. That flexibility seems really important.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about making AI accessible, no matter what infrastructure you have or your technical expertise.
And we can't forget that HudgeS is open source. That seems like a big deal, giving companies more control over their data. And they avoid getting locked in with some proprietary system.
Absolutely. It means they can tap into the whole open source community, all that innovation, which can lead to much better solutions.
We also talked about the security and compliance side of things, which is obviously super important when dealing with sensitive data. It sounds like Hugging Face has been really careful there.
Yeah, they've built in all these safeguards and made sure everything meets the standards. They even tried to minimize compliance risks by including all the necessary licenses and terms of service with HudgeS.
So they're making it easier for companies to use AI in a responsible way. Which brings us to those bigger questions. Like, what does it mean to make AI chatbot creation so accessible? On the one hand, you could have a ton of innovation, with more companies using this technology in creative ways.
But there's also the potential for misuse. What if companies just jump on the AI bandwagon without really thinking it through? And what about the companies that decide not to use these tools?
Right. There's a lot to think about, a lot of potential downsides.
Mm.
But you have to admit, Hugging Face is really pushing the boundaries here. It's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out.
I agree. This could be a turning point for the whole AI industry. HudgeS might just be the thing that changes everything.
Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to go back to that orange researcher who's already using HudgeS.
Oh, you mean Ghislain Putois?
Yeah, that's right. He was really impressed with how well HudgeS worked with Google Cloud and their L4 GPUs.
Yeah,
It's not just that he liked the tech, but that a big company like Orange is already using it. Makes you wonder if other big companies are going to start doing the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. If companies like Orange see the value in this new approach, it could start a whole trend.
So basically, HudgeS is more than just a new product. It could be a total game changer for AI.
It's a big move by Hugging Face.
We'll have to see what happens next. So, to recap, we've been talking about HudgeS. It's this new service from Hugging Face that makes it way easier and cheaper to use AI chatbots. It's built on open source tech, so companies have more control.
And they're not limited to just a few models or types of hardware.
It's really flexible, and they've also made sure it's secure and complies with all the rules.
We also talked about some of the bigger questions.
Like, what are the potential downsides of making this technology so easy to use? And what does it mean for the future of AI?
Some really important stuff to think about.
But before we go, I want to leave you with one last thought. If AI is now this affordable and easy to use, what's stopping you from using it? Maybe it's time to finally build that chatbot you've been dreaming about.
And if a big company like Orange is using HudGes, maybe you should take a closer look too.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for listening. So we started out talking about HudgeS and how Hugging Face is trying to solve this problem. Building AI chatbots has always been so expensive and time-consuming, you know?
Right, exactly. And they're addressing that by offering these like ready-made AI models that you can
Right.
get up and running in minutes. Really cuts down on development time and cost like a lot.
And it's not just like a cookie-cutter solution, right? HudgeS lets companies choose from all these different large language models, like 13 of them, and it works with all sorts of hardware. Seems like that flexibility is a big part of their strategy.
Yeah, for sure. It's about making AI accessible to everybody. No matter what kind of infrastructure you've got or how much technical know-how you have.
And don't forget, it's all open source. That seems to be a really important difference. Companies get more control over their data and avoid getting stuck with some proprietary system.
Totally. And it means they can benefit from all the innovation happening in the open source community, which can lead to some really, really cool solutions.
We also talked about security and compliance, which is obviously super important, especially when you're dealing with sensitive data. Sounds like Hugging Face has been really careful about that.
Oh yeah, they built in all those safeguards and made sure everything's up to snuff. They've even tried to minimize the whole compliance risk thing by including all the licenses and terms of service right there in HudgeS.
So they're really making it easier for companies to, adopt AI and actually use it responsibly.
Which brings us back to some of those bigger questions we've been talking about, like what happens when you make it this easy to create AI chatbots? Could be a lot of good things, like tons of innovation and new ways to use this tech.
But there's always that flip side, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What if people misuse it? What about the companies that don't jump on the AI bandwagon? Right, there are some potential downsides to consider. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but Hugging Face is definitely pushing the envelope here.
Definitely. This could be a real turning point for the whole AI world. And HudgeS might be the thing that kicks it all off.
Before we wrap things up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about that quote from the researcher at Orange who's already using HudgeS.
You mean Destiny Putois?
Yeah, he was super happy with how well HudgeS worked with Google Cloud and those L4 GPUs. I think what really stood out to me wasn't just that he liked it, but that a company as big as Orange is already using this, you know? Makes you think, maybe this is how all the big companies will be doing AI in the future.
Yeah, it's possible if Orange sees the value in this kind of approach. Maybe other big companies will follow suit.
So to sum it all up, HudgeS is more than just a new product or whatever. It could really be a game changer for the entire AI landscape.
It's a bold move for sure. We'll see what kind of impact it has.
This deep dive has been really interesting. I think we covered a lot of ground here. We got into the technical details of HudgeS, but also talked about the bigger picture. What does this all mean for companies, for society?
Yeah, it was great exploring all this with you. Hopefully our listeners learned something new about AI and all the potential it has.
So here's a thought for everyone listening out there. If AI is now this affordable and easy to use, what's stopping you from, actually using it? Maybe it's time to build that chatbot you've always been thinking about.
Yeah, and if a huge company like Orange is already using HudgeS, maybe it's worth checking out.
And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.